After a rather intense visit to Al-Haji's village and the talks about his grandmother, we listen to the radio in silence for a while. Only Samuel softly sings along. And as I stare out of the window, my thoughts return to the story of the child in the pond with which this series began. Over the past few days, I've mainly seen how many children here are in urgent need of help. Just like a drowning child. Children like Annabelle, Fatima, Joshua and Al-Haji. Children that are hidden, neglected or possibly even left in the forest. They simply don't receive the care they desperately need. But what I haven't seen is what happens when someone does step into the water. Can children like Al-Haji actually be saved? And that's why we end this long day in the village of Sara and his mother. Sara is a 16-year-old boy. His mother is waiting for us in front of their house. We exchange a few words.
Hi. Thank you.
And then I wonder where Sara himself is. Until I hear it. That familiar rhythmic sound, unmistakable to anyone from the Netherlands. A bike. A tricycle with hand pedals comes racing towards us at full speed.
So is this your son?
Yeah.
Are you picking
I'm picking.
Sarah, how are you?
On the bike sits Sara, a teenage boy with a wide smile, dressed in a bright blue tunic, living proof that things can be different. My name is Max Bogaert, and you're listening to The Child in the Pond, Episode 3, Muddy Shoes. Together with Sara's mother and Femi, we sit down underneath the small overhang of their house. I ask his mother to take me back to the time before help arrived. What was their life like back then?
Okay, why I born Sara? I'm in the sofa.
So when she gave birth to Sara, she went to Mr. Kamara.
He tells me that shortly after Sara was born, his father left them. She searched for help and eventually found a doctor at Wessofod, a local organization and one of the partners of Samuel and his team.
Down and sort now. You don't sit now. Beke, don't they now form 4.
So she said they've helped her now. He's in high school now.
Wessofod decided to support Sara and his mother. And to cut a long story short, Sara now goes to secondary school. But the support didn't stop there. Because the help they received also set something in motion in Sara's mother.
So now she's an advocate to other mothers, other parents, for them to be proper caregivers of their children with disabilities.
She decided to become an activist herself, reaching out to other parents.
Because she doesn't want parents to lose hope because they've given birth to children with disabilities.
She shares her own story, how Sara's father left, how she found help, and how she now sees her son thrive.
Her husband abandoned her with the child, and she, as an advocate and a mother, she knows the houses of.
She tells me that by now she knows almost every child with a disability in the surrounding area.
She does home visits to speak with the parents as well, just so that they don't give up with the care that they are giving their children.
I ask what this has meant for the position of Sara and his family. Are they still stigmatized, like I've seen so many times before?
Stigmatized or like...
Other one them back. They don't take a hack. Say, anybody they take now notice for me picking. Other one them back. They can't try.
So she's saying that there are other parents or caregivers. Some of them have children who are visually impaired or physically impaired. But they also are trying. They are not giving up to take care of the children like before.
And where Sara was once a source of fear in the community, he is now a source of inspiration. And I've grown so used to talking about children with their families that I suddenly wonder whether Sara might want to speak for himself.
Does Sara speak?
Yes.
Oh, you do?
I want to go inside and the oath.
Maybe you can answer together. What are the hopes for the future for Sara?
I ask about their dreams for the future.
because I don't left this. I gave up.
She would really be pleased if by the time she dies, she knows that he has a place to stay, a place that he can call his own.
And what is Sarah's his own dream? What is Sarah's dream?
I want to make lights because I know not me one, not me the child miss auntie. I make out to me the child miss auntie. I put me to not.
He wants to make lights,
Electrician.
electricity. He wants to be an electrician.
Sarah dreams of becoming an electrician. And like a true teenager, he's keen to point out that this is his idea, not his mother's.
She's not the one that told him to say that, but that is what he wants to do for himself.
That's a good job. Do you like school?
You like for ghost?
I know go school me foot and this and foot.
School, Sarah says, school is my legs. By learning a lot, I try to compensate for the fact that I can't walk.
He loves to go to school because he loves learning. He wants to move around and see how people are working, how they're doing their work, how people are making phones, just so he can spy and see how they're doing all of that, because he also would love to learn.
Well, I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
It's really good.
Welcome.
During the conversation, I noticed that Sarah's CBR worker, Pore, has been listening along with a broad smile.
You are the CBR worker,
Yes, please.
right?
Yes.
From Sarah.
Pore tells me how much has changed for Sarah over the years.
Yeah.
We've helped him to get the mobility card, and also we've helped him to enroll in school.
Yeah, and spread awareness as well.
Yes, we do raise awareness in the community.
They helped arrange the tricycle, they ensured a safe school environment, and Sarah's mother has now become an activist herself for the rights of children with disabilities.
Yeah, Sarah's mother, I really do appreciate her, because she doesn't only stop with Sarah. She goes around the community to talk with other parents who have children living with disability. She encourages them not to give up on their kids. You should not throw them away, because they are also humans. So you should take good care of them. You should encourage them.
In everything Pore says, I hear a deep sense of pride, a certain fire. So I ask her how she herself ended up in this line of work.
And why do you want to do this kind of work? What is for you your personal motivation?
Thank you for that question.
She's thankful for the question and starts smiling.
My own personal motivation is that I'm also a person living with disability. So I know they say who feels it knows it. Because when I was coming up, when I was a kid, I was discriminated, pushed away by community people. I was never encouraged by friends. I do not have friends because of my condition.
Pore tells me that she too was systematically excluded for years because she has difficulty walking. And as she puts it, who knows it, feels it.
Some people push me away because they think that I'm not fit to be among them because of my condition. So working with persons living with disability, I know I have the passion. Working with them, I always talk to them, never to give up.
That's beautiful, yeah. So it's for you very personal as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just as I'm about to put my microphone away, Pore asks if she can share one final message for everyone who, like her, lives with a disability.
What I want to say is that to my colleagues out there, those living with disability, always have courage, because there is ability in disability. We need to change our mindset that I'm living with disability. Oh, I can't do this. No, you can do it. We can do it. So I want to encourage all those living with disability out there to have the courage to stand on their toes.
With renewed energy, I get into Samuel's car one last time. We begin the journey back to Freetown, and from there, back home, back to the Netherlands.
In and out.
In and out, that was good. Good to see that cases like Sarah's can improve so much.
So Sarah's case was very similar to Al-Haji.
In the car, Samuel tells me that Sarah's situation was once very similar to Al-Haji's, and that this might be the clearest proof that there is real hope for him as well.
So it gives us hope that with some amount of physical rehabilitation Al-Haji can gain some functioning.
Al-Haji needs more than physiotherapy and proper nutrition. Just like with Sara, the community will have to accept him.
But then outside the functioning, Al-Haji needs some amount of community acceptance, so that we, even after the therapy and everything, he will be able to thrive within a community that loves and respects him. And that's one thing that have really helped Sara, because the mother now is a very strong proponent for disability rights.
Yeah. It's amazing that she not.
I tell Samuel that I can hardly imagine a better example of CBR, community-based rehabilitation, than Sara's mother.
I think like CBR in its ultimate kind of form, right?
Yeah, that's the CBR we fight for. And if you look at the community now that Sara lives in, other children with disabilities that are now, their parents are now more accepting of their children. You know.
By investing in Sara and in the people around him, something fundamental has changed in how the community thinks about children with disabilities. A change not only for Sara, but hopefully for all the children in the future.
We invest in the child and the community, so we can make sure that when we move out of that community, the change we are coming with is not that one child has been saved or one child has been rehabilitated, but the entire community has been saved and has been rehabilitated. So we don't need to come back there, because they have been given the right trainings, the right awareness and all with regards to children with disabilities.
A few weeks later, I'm walking through my own city, Amsterdam. And even though the contrast with Sierra Leone is enormous, it's a little unsettling how quickly you get used to being back, as if these are two separate worlds, and one simply stops existing the moment you step into the other. My work here in the Netherlands continues as it has always done, and as harsh as it may sound, the stories of the children slowly fade into the background, even though I know their situation is still just as urgent. Meanwhile, Samuel and his team are busy taking the first steps for Annabelle, Fatima, Joshua and Al-Haji. There are treatment plans, I've seen them, plans that depend on donations. And yet, here I am, and it's not like I've turned my life upside down and started transferring almost all my money to Liliane Fonds or any other organization, despite everything I've seen. And that gnaws at me, which is why I want to end this series with someone who might be able to help me with this query. Someone who understands exactly where this inner conflict began. Someone who knows everything about the child in the pond and what that story truly asks of us. The philosopher and lecturer, Thomas Nys.
My name is Thomas Nys, and I teach ethics and political philosophy here at the University of Amsterdam, now for 15 years, I think.
And his first-year students, just like me, have to learn about a child in the pond.
Yes, the first-year students have to learn about the child in the pond. And relatively quickly, I think in week 2, we already discuss utilitarianism. And each year we pick Singer's text as a way of introducing the key ideas.
Let's start at the beginning. How did the philosopher Peter Singer come up with this example of the child in the pond that has now haunted generations of philosophy students? And to find the answer, we have to go back to 1971.
So Singer wrote his famous article in 1971, and it was a response or a reaction to a real-life tragedy. That's also the reason why we discuss it. It's not kind of an abstract thought experiment. But in 1971, there was the Bengal famine, and Singer was outraged that the West didn't do enough, according to him, to assist and to help the people who were subject to this famine. And indeed, right, this famine caused the deaths of tens of thousands of people. So that was the historical kind of cause or what prompted him to write the paper. And in order to convince people that they need to do something about it, he discusses this example of the child in the pond. And I think that's what's crucial. It's an image, it's an example that moves people, and they have very strong ideas about what should happen to the child in the pond. And from there on out, he works towards what we should do in the case of this famine.
Singer claimed in his famous paper that it's our moral duty to provide something like famine relief. And that idea is more radical than you might expect.
He says that if you would walk past a pond and a child would be drowning in the pond, then it's clear to all people that you just jump in and save the child, even if your shoes and your suit will get wet. And so his idea is that from everybody that we would hear that if they wouldn't save the child, that would be morally outrageous, right? It's just your duty to walk in, grab the child and save it from drowning. And he says this is because you can save a life, which is morally very significant, of course, and there's no moral cost to yourself, just wet shoes. And he says it's the same with the people in what's now Bangladesh. He says with a similar amount, right, the worth of your shoes, the cost of your shoes, you can save a child's or a person's life over there. And the point is that it's equally morally outrageous not to do so, not to do that, than not save the child. Whenever we donate, we shouldn't consider it charity as doing something beyond our moral duty. It's just fulfilling our moral duty. It's just decency, moral decency to do so.
Yeah, so people have an idea that it's nice to give to charity, but it's not an obligation or anything like that. So it's a good thing to do, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I'm an excellent human being when I donate, right? So I go above and beyond. And so one of these lessons is, well, we're not doing it. We're not even giving to charity. And secondly, we shouldn't conceive of it as charity and as moral excellence, but something really basic and minimal that we are doing.
And once again, I am struck by that same feeling I had in my first philosophy class. If this is true, then most of us in wealthy countries like the Netherlands should be doing much more. But wait, is it actually true? Does the argument really hold up according to Thomas Nys? Can we discuss some of the counter-arguments? Because I've been thinking it demands a lot from you if it were true. But is the analogy right? Like, you as a philosopher, do you think it holds ground, it makes sense?
Yeah, so there's two kind of important points where the analogy might break down. And so the one is that the child is kind of immediate, right? The child's over there, you're over here, and you can just walk in the pond and save the child. So it's a kind of a very immediate, in your environment, in your vicinity, someone is in need. But of course, people are thousands of miles away, and you don't see those people. So there's no kind of direct appeal from them. So distance would be one element that would be different from the pond and, let's say, the famine.
But according to Peter Singer, Thomas explains, distance is irrelevant. We live in what he calls a global village. We constantly influence one another, no matter how far apart we live.
He says, we think that there's this distance, but in terms of our aid and our aid being successful, we're as close as we are to the child, in the sense that we can just reach to our phones, transfer the money, and there are organizations that can help people on the ground with medical care, etc., with food.
What my journey through Sierra Leone may have taught me most of all is that these children are not thought experiments. They exist, and I've seen with my own eyes that our support can change their lives.
So according to him, this element of distance is irrelevant in a global village, where we are very close to each other in terms of what we can do to have an impact on others.
And then there is a second counter-argument, one I've often thought about myself. In the example of the pond, you are alone, and you're the only one who can save the child.
The other disanalogy is often that the child is dependent on me and me alone because I'm there at the pond. But in the case of the famine, right, there's thousands of others.
But here too, Singer says that the fact that we are with more is irrelevant.
If everybody would donate, that would be sufficient to rescue those people, then of course you shouldn't help, in the sense that you were doing too much, right? It wouldn't be necessary anymore. But he says that's not the case, of course. First place, nobody's doing anything, or not enough people are doing anything, and there's so many that could use our assistance, not only in the Bengal region, but elsewhere and so on. If two people are already swimming out, then of course you stepping in seems redundant, right? It wouldn't help for one child. But if there's tens or hundreds of children drowning, and everyone is an onlooker, which is what Singer thinks is happening, then of course you just jump in and save as many as you can.
I started to notice that what you might call counter-arguments to the child in the pond analogy aren't really philosophical in nature. They're psychological explanations to explain why people feel like they might not need to help. And we'll come back to that, because that distinction matters. There's a difference between explaining why people donate so little and morally justifying it. But first, I want to know how Thomas's students respond to the story of the child in the pond. Did they react the same way as I did? I'm curious how your students react to this story, because I remember when I learned about it, I remember that during that week I went to my parents' place and they told me they were renovating their kitchen. And I don't remember exactly how much it cost, but it was, I think, a couple of €1,000. And I remember sitting there and listening to them talking about the new things they would buy for their new kitchen. And I could only think, like, you know how many lives you might be able to save with that kind of money. You already had a kitchen.
It was
and
fine,
I was
Mom
just,
and Dad. Yeah.
Like almost morally outraged that they're renovating something like that. But then I also now noticed that I spend my life like that too, you know, like I buy my expensive coffees, I go out for dinner. How do your students react to this? Do you recognize this kind of like conflict?
I don't know. So I think on the one hand, I do know that many people as students were kind of changed by the paper. Even, I mean, if only in the way that you were changed by it, that you now become perceptive of the way people spend their resources and money and time, which could be allocated in a better way. So just being aware of this is something that the paper definitely does. I also know people and colleagues who have radically changed their ways and donated much more ever since they read the paper. And I think I still see in students this change, but I think that is kind of almost the silent part of the students who you can see are affected by it and persuaded by the argument, also arguing against their other students who want to resist it.
And this is where it gets interesting. Most people resist the argument, or at least don't radically change their lives after encountering it, even though almost everyone agrees with the basic premises of the story. Which raises a central question. If the argument is so compelling, why is doing the right thing so difficult?
Yes, but I think it's important to realize this obstacle, right? It's important to get to terms with it and to acknowledge it, that it's difficult for us to do. So I think many philosophers in the history of philosophy are convinced of this, or moral pessimists. So they indeed believe that there is this mighty counterweight, in Immanuel Kant's words, that prevents us from doing the right thing, which is our own happiness and well-being. And I think that the Greeks didn't seem to be bothered as much by that idea. They had the optimist belief that if we take away the irrational grounds for not acting, if we know what we should do and what the good is, then we will automatically do the right thing.
But according to Thomas, we're living proof that knowing what is right doesn't lead to doing what is right. But it seems that there is a danger in this realization too. It might be a danger too about a story like this, right? Like that people respond to it in this way. Like if the moral demand is so high that people kind of retract into this kind of cynicism and don't do anything at all.
Yes, and don't do anything at all. I think, and I want to say it's not my fault, right? It's the way the world is organized that's preventing us from doing this good, because we're more than willing to do so. But I think that's clearly not the case, in the sense that indeed there's so many ways to do that. And it's also never really founded on empirical data that it's not effective. It's just, right, it might be not effective or not fully be effective. And that's enough, this kind of uncertainty, to do so. And you could go back to the pond, right? You could say, well, you might not get to the child, or you jumping in will cause a wave on the other side of the pond. And it's all, I think, nonsense. Because you clearly know that you trying would definitely be better than not trying at all.
And this is where we need to start looking beyond philosophy. Why does it psychologically feel so different when we see a child drowning right in front of us compared to knowing that a child is suffering far away? And there is someone who's great at explaining this difference. Professor in social psychology, Paul van Lange.
My name is Paul van Lange and I work at the Free University in Amsterdam for quite a considerable time, and I focus on human cooperation as a main topic. And human cooperation includes, for example, all sorts of things, like, for example, what might people do for a community. There are also basic questions about trust, basic questions about empathy, basic questions about norm violations that are all part of the general theme of human cooperation.
Together with Paul, I revisit the story of the pond. And Paul explains that when we see a child drowning right in front of us, we are overwhelmed by one single emotion: empathy.
It's interesting that as a scientist, you always have to diagnose a situation. And if you see a child in a pond drowning or about to drown, then time is a big issue. And that's already very important. But the other thing is that you can actually offer help and make a real difference. This is not something that crosses the minds of people at the time when they see this. But as a scientist, this is important to realize. And because time is such a big issue, and you see the suffering, or you frame the situation in terms of suffering, and that you can provide effective help, that combination allows for, let's call it, automatic help. So you want to help immediately. And one emotion that is crucial for this is the emotion of empathy. And empathy in this situation is not something very conscious. It's not a product of full awareness. It's basically something that is automatically activated because time is such a big thing. You need to act now, and you can provide effective help as an individual.
And while my conversation with Thomas left me feeling rather somber, Paul is strikingly optimistic. According to him, empathy is an enormous human strength. It's deeply wired into us to help others, even people we don't know.
Yeah, so empathy is really the powerful force of helping. And there's lines of research, very interesting, by Daniel Batson, and I've also done research on this, to show basically that empathy is it's a very basic emotion, and it may activate pure forms of altruism. It's not about instrumental helping. It's not about calculative helping so much, thoughtful help. It's more like you do it impulsively.
What do you think is the evolutionary function of empathy? Why are we wired like this?
What I find really nice about empathy is that you don't choose to be empathetic. It's something that will occur. And it's in that sense, a very deeply rooted emotion. And of course, there must be evolutionary benefits to have these high levels of empathy, and that they are activated with such automaticity. One is more tied to your offspring. So if we did not have a system, the emotion of empathy, we probably would sleep during the night and not be disturbed by the crying of your baby, for example. So it has clear benefits in terms of immediate helping of especially the small and the vulnerable.
But Paul believes that the origins of empathy go far beyond caring for your own children.
Now, the second benefit, evolutionary benefit that I see is that it's not only offspring, but also people live their lives in small groups. And in small groups, it's also very nice that you know that if you're part of the group, that people will pay attention to you, that you are there, that in times of really urgency and danger, that you will be helped. And I think that's also probably mediated by empathy, that one of your own group, so to speak, that needs help, that you can offer that help almost impulsively.
Paul tells me that empathy truly comes into play in our brains only when there's someone right in front of us, a concrete person, not an abstract story.
Yes, I see empathy as a truly interpersonal emotion. And why is that the case? Because you can only help one individual. And that individual can be a child, can be a fellow in your group. It's always one individual. If you see a group of people who are suffering, like in war times or a group of refugees, people talk about empathy as a very important emotion. But it's not, I don't believe it's a group-based emotion. It's basically, when you look at a group of refugees, for example, in a boat trying to reach a new country and to provide safe situations for themselves, then what you will see is that most people will probably pay attention to one individual. And that one individual, that phase, the emotions, the suffering of that one individual is the guiding mechanism that leads you to empathize. It's not the group. You sort of forget about the group. You also forget about the numbers. It's more the phase of one individual that matters, and that is responsible for the feeling of empathy.
And when we're not confronted with one person, but with a large group, something else happens. Something that the American psychologist Paul Slovic has called psychic numbing. Our brain becomes desensitized when numbers grow large. One drowning child affects us deeply, but with 10, we don't feel 10 times as much. In fact, we often feel even less. Our brains simply weren't built for caring about large numbers.
There's a limit to it. That people at a certain moment, with the increasing repetition of the same or similar information, that people cannot always reactivate empathy, although small forms of it may still be active actually, but it becomes taxing at a certain moment. You know what to expect because you've seen it before. At a certain moment, it's too taxing. It becomes more like stress than empathy.
So it's almost self-protecting when you kind of stop feeling everything. Like imagine if you have to feel everything all the time.
According to Paul, we can be grateful for our human capacity for empathy. It's a primal instinct that drives us to help others. But it's also important to recognize where empathy works and where it falls short. Because when it comes to large global problems, to people who don't look like us or live far away, we can't rely on the feeling alone. And as Thomas said earlier, doing good is often hard work, not because we don't know what the right thing is, but because our brains don't always make it easy to do it. And that is precisely why Paul says we need to keep encouraging one another, keep inspiring each other to do good.
I think it's very important. People live their lives, their local lives, in small social groups. And those social groups are very important for your own reputation. And you cannot afford, that's also an evolutionary argument, you cannot afford to be excluded from groups, basically. In the old days, but that's also true now. So people really care about the reputation they have in their own local environments. And if you can shape, to some degree, reinforce a positive culture in those small groups, and when you think in terms of the effectiveness of help, this is a very important approach to target groups rather than individuals.
And if you ever find yourself unsure how to inspire people around you and create a culture of giving, you can always return to the story of the pond.
I think the text is so powerful because it starts with something that isn't abstract, but this real life catastrophe that is happening. And that goes for 1971 and the Bengal famine, but of course that goes for today as well, right? So that's, I think, very powerful. And then secondly, it's this reasoning by analogy. So it starts from something that everybody thinks is self-evident, you should save the child or you're a moral monster. That's just the starting point. And then, constructing the analogy and saying it's the same what you're doing. So you should be outraged at your own behavior. I think that's the power of the paper.
Yeah. And in the end, how do you think people should think about or counter that kind of cynicism we just talked about in that it might just be a drop in the ocean, what you're contributing?
Indeed, you could say, oh, but it's only a drop in the ocean because the problems of our world are so big. But of course, that attitude in saying, why should I save this little child, this one child, when there's so much, is awful. Because you could save people with or by donating money. So this kind of throwing your hands in the air and saying, well, there's much worse things, or even if I do this, then the value of an individual life, I think that's Singer's point, is just so massive compared to your shoes and the way you spend your money in kitchens, etc., that you ought to act. So yes, you could say a drop in the ocean, but a very, very considerable
If that drop represents a single life,
yes,
then it's infinitely big, right?
Yeah, if someone would compare your life to a drop in the ocean, you would say, well, yeah, true, but it's tremendous, right? Just to be and remain alive is just tremendous.
What do you think is like why should people care about children with disability as a charity to give to? Why do you think it's a worthwhile cause in the big picture? Like, why are you working in disability care? Why not in poverty in general, or like some other malaria prevention?
Because no other person will. That's the simple answer. So many people feel like working on disability inclusion is a waste of time. The question is, do you feel that way? Do you feel that a whole set of human beings working for their rights, working for their inclusion, if you feel it's a waste of time, then there's no point in giving back to them. But the reason why we work on it, the reason why we push for it, is because other people won't. And I want all those who are listening to this podcast to be those people who will listen to them, who will push for it, who will contribute to disability inclusion, because it just takes one person to make a change, and you can be that one person.
Just like all of you are the one person here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks. The Child in the Pond is a podcast made by me, Max Bogaert, in collaboration with Liliane Fonds. For more information on the work of the Liliane Fonds and pictures of this episode, visit lilianefonds.org/podcast.